Now, my presentation will follow the following outline. There will be an introduction, then there will be background to the National Reading Program, then there will be the National Reading Program, achievements and impact. Now, to begin with, colleagues, let me locate the country. Malawi is located to the southeastern part of Africa, as you can see on the map. It covers a total area of 119,140 square meters, of which 20% is covered by the lake, which is the lake in Malawi. And in terms of population, we are 17.5 million, according to the 2018 census. In terms of official language, it's English. National language is Chichewa. And we have also more than 10 local languages and dialects. Let's move to the. Now, let me go through the education system as part of the introduction. In terms of administration structure, we have, the ministry headquarters. Below the ministry headquarters, we have 6 education districts. And below the 6 education districts, we have 34 education division, that's 6, and below them, they have 34 education districts. That is according to primary school structure. Then we have about over 500 zones, and each zone has schools between 12 to 14 schools. Now, background to the introduction of National Reading Program. Malawi has been learners have been performing poorly in reading achievements. As you can see, the results of SACMEC 2, 3, and 4, you see that Malawi is actually at the bottom of these countries. It's at the very bottom, meaning that we haven't been doing well in reading and literacy. Then let's now go back to the background to the National Reading Program. Prior to the introduction of the National Reading Program, we had a number of reading instructional interventions. For example, we had the Malawi Breakthrough to Literacy, which was implemented or piloted in the period between 2003 to 2005. It was in 2 education districts, and it targeted 153 schools, supported by the FID. Then we had the primary school support project, which was piloted in 2006 to 2009, and it was actually in 1 education district, and it covered 226 schools, and over 40,000 standard 1 learners were actually involved, and it was funded by USAID. Then we had the Malawi Teacher Professional Development Support, activity between 2010 and 2013. It covered 7 education districts, and we involved 1,310 schools, and over 201 learners were involved, and this again was supported by USAID. Then we have the early grade reading activity between 2013 and 2016, and it covered a total of 11 education districts, and 1,595 schools participated, and about 800,071 to 3 learners were involved, and this again was actually supported by USAID. Now let's go through the lessons that we learned from these pilots. Firstly, we learned that the proper sequencing of letters and the phonemes is very important if the learners are to acquire literacy skills at the earliest stages. Again, we learned that the teachers need proper and adequate training. Again, we also learned that teacher support plays a very important role in ensuring effective content delivery. Again, we also learned that the local communities have an important role in supporting learners. And finally, we also learned that the availability of reading materials and adequate time for practicing reading are crucial in ensuring effective acquisition of reading skills by learners. Now, let's now go to the background of the National Reading Program. And firstly, we actually embarked on developing the National Reading Strategy. In 2014, the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology developed the National Reading Strategy with technical and financial support from USAID. The National Reading Strategy was informed by the lessons from the literacy pilots that I have talked about and in international research. Key features of the National Reading Strategy are as follows: phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary development, reading fluency, and reading comprehension strategies. They will also look at the explicit reading standards for each grade level in each language, that is in English. The teacher and school material that support teaching and student learning. Then teachers with the prerequisite skills and knowledge. And finally, we also looked at it also concentrated on the allocation of adequate time for reading instructions. Now, let's look at the National Reading Program. What was the goal of the NRP? The goal was to improve reading achievements of standards 1 to 4 learners in order to ensure that at least 50% of learners who complete standard 4 can read at that level. And it had the following main objectives. Firstly, to improve reading instructions for better primary grade reading outcomes. Then to increase parental and community engagement in supporting student reading. Then to create safer learning environments for reading, including for learners with disabilities. And what are the key activities that we actually embarked on? Firstly, training of teachers and other relevant personnel. Again, we developed, print, and distribute teaching and learning materials to all the schools. And let me mention here that we distributed these materials, especially the context books, in one-to-one ratio for both English and Chichewa. Then providing opportunities for all learners to read, such as producing braille and right print version for the parents to actually cater for those learners with special needs. Then we established teacher support systems in terms of coaching. Then we also mobilized community members to support activities aimed at promoting reading. Again, establishing national reading assessment systems. Then establishing continuous assessment and remediation system under YESA. Then creating policy environment to support inclusive education. These are the activities that we embarked on in NRP. Now, the NRP implementation arrangement. First, let me mention that there have been close collaboration between MOES, Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, USAID, and USAID implementing partners. And the partners that we are talking about here are Merit, YESA, SEGREM, and the actual RIFA. Under this arrangement, MOES provided the policy direction, oversight, and personnel, while the USAID provided the funding and general oversight. And implementing partners provided the technical expertise. And we had also the National Steering Committee, which provided the forum for policy and the decision making. What are the main achievements? Firstly, as I indicated, we developed printed and distributed over 24 million teaching and learning materials. These include the learner's books, teachers' guides, and supplementary readers to ensure that learners have an interaction with the books. Again, we developed 96 titles of supplementary readers in vCIES and English. Again, we embarked on a training of standard 1 to 4 teachers on reading instruction. Again, we trained all primary education advisors, section heads, and head teachers on providing instructional support to teachers such as coaching. Then we also established a system for school-based coaching, continuous assessment, and remediation, and reading assessment. Again, we established support for children with disabilities. That's we had to develop print, braille, and already print version of most teaching and learning materials. We also organized the Braille Cup, A-grade reading assessment, and A-grade for Braille and the sign language. Now, let us look at now the impact of national reading program. As you can see, so far, two national reading assessments were conducted in 2017 and 2018. And this was done in Standard 2 and Standard 4 in vCIES and English. If you look at the display, you will notice that assessments showed that reading performance increased in 22 out of the 24 indicators. So you can see that at least there is a big improvement. Let me also mention here that this is not a mean improvement, it's a big improvement because before we started the NRP, most of our learners were scoring zeros in most of these classes. So for us to actually achieve 22 out of 24 indicators, it's a big achievement. And as conclusion, let me say this, that we are working on consolidating and accelerating gains to have actually, gained so far in reading achievement in Standard 1 to 4. And we feel we should expand NRP to Standards 5 to 8 for curriculum continuity. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kamkuza, for that presentation. We're going to go straight on to the next presentation, which is by Dr. Grace Chue. Grace, if you're on the line and you can hear me, just let me know.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much, Grace. Do you want to put your video on so people can see who you are?
Okay. Right there?
Yeah, there you go. So
Okay.
Dr. Grace Chue is with RTI International supporting the Merit program. She is our reading, instruction, and teacher training specialist. And Grace will be presenting on the teacher professional development aspect of the national reading program. So just give me a minute, let me share the screen.
Okay.
Can you see the presentation, Grace?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's afternoon in Malawi. I'm going to present on the kind of support that the National Reading Program has provided to teachers. Next one. So what the program did was to do 3 approaches to providing professional development for teachers. The first one was a series of face-to-face trainings, and you see on your right, those are pictures of trainers. The second one was the school-based coaching by section heads. Jeremiah already talked about that. And the last one was the community of practice that in Malawi we are locally calling it teacher learning circles. So why this approach? Why three kinds of support? There's a lot of research that is suggesting that teacher professional programs must have various formats so that teachers are learning and are being supported. There is also a lot of research recommending that teachers should be in communities. Finally, in our own national reading strategy that Jeremiah talked about, it indicates that the corridor of teacher training has positive impact on student learning outcomes. So within our context of Malawi, we're saying, well, the teacher education programs, yes, are offering reading instruction, but these courses are underdeveloped. So we needed a better way of training our teachers in teaching reading. The second one, we also heard already from Jeremiah, the literacy intervention programs had showed a lot of promise of supporting teachers and its impact. Then we also were looking at the cost-effective solutions as well as local solutions for Malawi, and then providing school-based coaching. Next. So I'll start with the face-to-face training, our first approach. In this one, we adopted a cascade model using the various existing systems under the Ministry of Education that Jeremiah talked about at national level, district level, and zonal level. Bidem, let's go to the next one and just quickly show so that you see what I'm talking about. This is the kind of cascade model that we use. So we had a core team of 16 national facilitators who would then train 150 master trainers, and they turned around and they did a training of trainers of 1,100 who eventually got to the teachers to do the training. Let's go back. And let's go back to the second one. Bidem, let's go back. Yes, and then we developed a facilitator guide to support the facilitators when they are conducting the trainings, accompanied by a participant workbook that was given out to the participants. So our thinking was that with a lot of modeling by the facilitators, and then the participants would do lots of practice sessions. So after observing the model, the demonstrations by the facilitators, participants would get in groups, would get in pairs, and practice that activity. Finally, we had a 1 day of practicum because the trainings for the teachers were done at a teacher development center that is located at a school. So they would have access to teachers, access to learners. So all the while, Merit provided technical and logistical support. Let's move. So who received this training? You see the numbers, they are very high numbers. We trained all standard 1 to 4 teachers in this program. We also had trainings for head teachers, the primary education advisors, section heads who are also teachers, and we trained teachers for special needs education, and also teachers from the private school sector. So this is what had happened, because as you see, these numbers are really huge. Our first point that we're concerned about is the multiple cascade levels. You see from 16 to 150 to 1,550, and eventually to the teachers 60,000. So we wanted to shorten that, but because we had a limited pool of trainers, that was not possible to do. Another problem was the materials distribution in terms of distributing the teacher, the facilitator guide, and the participant workbook to get to the training center. The distances are long, and a lot of the roads, the network is not that good. So from the distribution point, the printing point to get to the training centers, that was a big problem. Initially in 2016, and as well as in 2017, the printing capacity was was limited, and so it delayed the distribution of the resources, and therefore trainings were commencing without materials. But this is our 5th year. We got better by the year, and so we learned from our challenges, we improved the system and operation. So that is the thing of the past. I think starting from 3rd year, we did experience a lot of this. The capacity had expanded in terms of printing, and also our planning. We're doing it well in advance, so we had a lot of time to do that. Next. So what are teacher experiences in the face-to-face trainings? As you see the numbers right there, the majority of teachers found that these trainings are useful or they are very useful. Those are high proportions of teachers, 85 to 97%. Then there is also very high participation. 93% of teachers attending at least one national reading program training, and around 2/3 attending 3 or more trainings. Next. And these are quotes from 2 of our teachers. The first one on the left is from a 3rd grade teacher, and the one on the right is from a 2nd grade teacher who also is one of our national facilitators, the only teacher who is a national facilitator. I'll give you a few seconds to read. Okay, next. All right, we come to the second approach. Jeremiah talked about establishing support systems and talking about teacher learning circles. So this one was our second approach to providing teacher professional support. So also in the literature that I shared, the evidence I shared with you, it was talking about collaborative learning environments for teachers, communities of practice, and in Malawi we call them teacher learning circles, where teachers from 1st to 4th grade would come together to learn from each other, practice the teaching activities that are found in their teacher guide. To provide a very cost-effective way at the school so that they are working as a team, they are learning together and finding solutions to their problems. They meet once a month. At the end of the school day, they choose a day, and then they meet for 90 minutes. How this is done is that Merit provided an agenda and topics. Because research says we need to provide teachers with a structure. They can't read these things. There are 10 steps that they had in the teaching activities in their teacher guide, as well as identifying practices that they are going to do differently. And then the section head, who is their coach, would follow up during the month to find out if teachers are really doing what they mentioned that they are doing. A key feature of the teacher learning circles is that a teacher who is found to be performing very good is recognized and awarded a star teacher certificate. Next. Next. Hello. Hello, Bidemi. Hi.
Hey, what can you see?
Just the teacher experience, the one I have talked about. Next one. I think the others before that.
Can you see the school-based coaching slide?
Yeah, but that's where
Sorry?
I need to finish the teacher learning circles first.
So you want me to go back?
Some stuff, I think. A little bit.
Go back?
Yeah. Yeah, so what I was saying about the teacher learning circles. So we started in September 2018, and you can see 74% of the sampled schools had conducted they had by that time in January 2019, they needed to have run 4 teacher learning circles. So 74% had attended that one, reported attending all the TLCs at their school. And they were also rated very highly, either very useful or useful. So these were comments that teachers were sharing about their experiences. They also mentioned that they are providing opportunities for them to learn together in a classroom, but it is creating a sort of a collegiality among them so that they have peers that work together with them. Then the opportunity to reflect on what they are teaching, because one of the steps in the TLC is reflect and share. So they also recommended it was a good practice. The last one, the idea that the section head go around finding out if you are really implementing what you said you would do differently. They thought that was a good thing to be happening. So those are teacher experiences about the community of practice in our context. And then next one, we are talking about the school-based coaching. The last one is the school-based coaching. What the National Reading Program has done is to bring coaching to the classroom. So the section head, who is one of the teachers responsible for a section, does the coaching. They will use a teacher observation instrument that we have developed, and they do it once a month, and the primary education advisor then supports them with their coaching. And you see in the diagram that the pair is at the top and the section heads coach teachers in their sections. Next one. Okay, so again, yes, coaching is right at the school, because before National Reading Program, I think, yes, there were efforts to do that, but they were not brought to the school. The big teams coming from outside the school to come and support teachers. So with this, National Head had provided between 4 and 10 or more coaching sessions, and these are huge proportions. Between 4 and 10, that is a lot. Because previously we have maybe 3 times in a year, or 1 time somebody comes to your classroom. So these are really huge numbers. Almost all teachers have received in-school coaching since 2017. And by the time this survey was done, we were just midway in our 2018-2019 school year. And you can see there, 90% of the teachers were coached. And around half, they had been coached 3 or more times. So this is one of the impacts of the National Reading Program. So what are the results of this, the frequency of this kind of coaching? You can see there, we do have a lesson cycle, the gradual release of responsibility, we are calling the GRRM. Teachers have to demonstrate the model, then followed by learners practicing with the teacher of guided practice, and then the learners do independent practice. So you see the high proportions of teachers actually doing that, because that's what they're supposed to do according to the teacher guide. Also, 83% of the teachers are on schedule in their progress through the NRP curriculum for that subject as well as for that grade. And you see below, high percentages of teachers using local language. We provided enough guidance on how to use local language. Some classrooms were trained, classes were trained into teaching English into the local languages, but we provided guidance, and so there was an effective way of using local language to support learners' understanding. And there's still some areas that teachers require support.
So Grace, sorry, we also have to wrap up soon so others can come
So, and then you see those topics that teachers still require support, and I mentioned at the beginning that our reading instruction in teacher programs is not developed. So still need some support with sounds, ending lessons before the time, and establishing routines and procedures is still they still need some kind of support. And we did a training in December to support teachers with that. Then the final slide is about talking about sustainability. What are the issues to do with sustainability? In that, we are talking about making the teacher circles as part of the official school calendar. We are also saying there's a structure called district review meetings. We want it to continue so that they are able to share. The National Reading Program components, the curriculum itself, has been included in the teacher education programs with support from GIZ, who are running that activity. And finally, the key teacher who is at the school must be elevated so that they are able to support teachers in the schools around them. So that's my presentation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Grace, for the presentation. We're now going to go to the presentation by Yesa Mavuto. I believe you will be sharing your own presentation, so please go ahead and do so.
Carol, can you share yours? I think I want to be able to share mine. Yes.
Okay, sure. Let me know when you see it.
Yes, I've seen it.
Okay, so over to you.
Right. Thank you so much, Carol. I'll now take you through adapting and going to scale with the continuous assessment and the targeted remediation and the national reading program. Next. Carol, go next. So I'll first give you an outline of what is contained in this presentation. I'll talk about the overview of the Malawi National Reading Program, continuous assessment and remediation. I'll also present the Malawi context in terms of classes. I also talk about adapting remediation for NRP. I'll also present to you the technical approach, and then I'll finally give you the successes and challenges so far. Let me talk about the National Reading Program, continuous assessment and the remediation. Yes, sir. The key objective mainly. The key objective for National Reading Program continuous assessment is to provide technical support to the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology. Carol? Hello, Carol? Hello, Carol?
Yes.
You have gone to the next slide before I finish the first slide.
Oh, sorry.
The screen that you have also presented has like faces, videos on the other side, so I can't see the other part of the information.
I'm not quite sure what you mean. Stephanie, can you confirm what you're seeing on your screen?
So I can see the full screen. Mavuto, it might be the screen settings on what you're able to, but we can see the full screen right now. It says YESA, continuous assessment and remediation, and it has your key objectives.
Okay. Yes, there you are.
Okay.
Yes. So I was saying that I'll present to you the National Reading Program, YESA, continuous assessment and remediation, the key objective of it. So we're saying that the key objective for the YESA is an open zero activity is to provide technical support to the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology in the development of standard 1 to 4 reading assessment tools, remediation methodology, and the remediation activities that will ensure that all learners in the classroom develop foundational literacy skills and can read with the comprehension by the end of standard 4. Now, why remediation? 2018 National Reading Assessment results shows that the 75.9% of standard 2 learners could not read even a single familiar word in Chichewa, and Chichewa is our national language and is spoken widely in Malawi. And it also shows that the 27.3% of standard 4 learners could not read a single familiar word in Chichewa as well. In terms of oral reading fluency, standard 2 learners scored 4.2 correct words per minute. That's an average. And the standard 4 were able to read fluently words, 30.9 correct words per minute. Next. Now I'll give you the context, Malawian context. In Malawi, most of the classes are very large. In the picture that has been presented there, you can see that there are a lot of learners in one class against one teacher, which becomes very difficult for a teacher to provide individual support to learners. Next. And there is also an issue of resource limitations in Malawi. You can see that in that picture that all the learners have seated on the floor, and most of them do not have books. And this is also one of the issues, the situation in Malawi. Next. Let me also talk about the capacity gaps in terms of our teachers in Malawi. Most of the teachers do not know how to handle large classes and how to use the few resources that they have, to reach out to each and every learner in that particular class. You can see in that picture, the teacher has formulated a group of more than 10 learners, and there is only one letter card that is being shown to the group, and the other learners can't even see what is happening in the middle. Next. The other thing that I would want to talk about is that our timetable, curriculum timetable, particularly in primary schools, is loaded with subjects. For example, if you look at that particular timetable for a junior class and for a junior class, you find that a teacher is supposed to teach about 10 subjects per day. And with the large class that I've talked about in my area slide, you will see that it is tiresome for a teacher to teach all these subjects to more than 100 and maybe 50 plus learners in a day. So it becomes very difficult for a teacher to provide individual support to the learner. Next. Now, I would want to talk about the developing of remediation methodology for Malawi National Reading Program. Firstly, YESA is adapting successful approaches to remediation to standard 1 and 2. Because the successful approaches that we have used in most of the countries that are being used in standard 3 and 4. Now in Malawi, we are trying to adapt this in standard 1 and 2. YESA is also trying to align the content and the timing of the continuous assessment and remediation activities with the primary school curriculum, so that whatever they do during the instructional hours shouldn't be different from what they do during the remediation time. We are also tackling on the problem of large classes, just like what I said earlier on, to say most of the classes in Malawi are very large. So we're trying to make sure that we are putting in place strategies that teachers can use so that they can reach out to each and every learner in class so that they can develop in reading skills. We are also developing reading assessments that are quick and easy to administer so that they shouldn't be very difficult for a teacher to administer to a large class. Another point is that we are also trying to increase teacher time with the learner in need of additional support. And we are also trying to find time within the school days so that the teacher can provide remediation to learners who had problems during the instruction time in class. Next. Now, our technical approach was developed based on the literature review and examination of successful programs in other countries. For example, this is a bit related to what we call teaching at a right level. This approach also uses the teacher-administered curriculum-based reading assessment implemented throughout the term. The assessments were made in order of the learners, in the order how the units are being introduced in the learner's book. So the assessments also follows the order of those units so that learners must be able to progress as they learn in their classes. The other point is that this approach groups learners based on their performance on the assessments. Next. I have an example of a picture, a picture here where learners are in a group. They are working on a game that is involving letter cards. If you see in that group, these learners, it means they did not master naming the letters. That's why they are given those cards to work together in a form of a game. Next. Now, the mediation groups that are formed in the classes are given activities that are tailored specifically to the skills still not mastered. For example, if a learner struggled in the syllables during the assessment, it means during the mediation, the teacher is going to provide remediation activities that are related to the problem that was identified during the assessment. Learners are also assessed and regrouped at specified times throughout the school year. For example, if a learner was grouped in a letter name group, and after being given remediation activities, and you find that that learner has graduated to the next group, he can only graduate to the next group if the other assessment has also been administered to regroup this particular learner in a different group. Go next. Now, let me talk about the successes to date. The monitoring visits that we have had have provided anecdotal evidence that when this technical approach is implemented with fidelity, teachers will improve their skills in assessing learners' reading abilities. Teachers are also able to track learners' progress over time using the assessment that we have already talked about. Teaching is also being informed by the assessment results. For example, if the learners are not doing well in a particular skill, it means the teacher is going to revisit his or her methodologies that he is going to use in the class during the instruction. Next. So here, this is a picture of a document that a teacher uses to track learners' performance, and this document is called a skill chart. And the skill chart documents learners' progress over time, and it shows whether the learner is progressing or the learner is not progressing based on the results of the assessments. Next. Learners are being assisted based on their needs. Previously, learners were being given what we call one size fits all. This time, learners are not being given one size fits all because they are given activities based on how they performed in the assessment. learners are also improving in their basic reading skills, because as they are playing remediation games, they have fun at the same time they are learning, and they're progressing through the ladder of reading skills. Teachers have also improved skills to handle large classes. Just like what I said earlier, I want to say most of the classes in Malawi are large. YESA has brought in methodologies on how teachers can handle large classes. For example, use of group leaders to facilitate remediation games during the remediation periods. And then schools are also able to track how teachers are performing in their respective classes using the document that I showed you, the skill chart. If the head teacher comes to a class to ask for that particular book, he can easily see how the teacher is doing in that particular class by following the progress of all the learners in the skill chart. Next. Thank you so much for your attention. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you. Hello, Carol. Hello.
Oh, hello. Sorry, I was on mute.
Oh, okay.
I've been talking to myself. Anyway, thank you very much, Mavuto.
Yeah.
And we will now go on to our final presentation, which is by Betty Wisicki from the Refund Program, Juarez and Associates. Betty, can you unmute, please? Excellent. And Betty, you will share your own screen?
Yeah, let me try. So if I have some challenges, I'll let you know.
Okay. Okay. It looks good.
Can people be able to see?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Carol. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to other places where it's still in the morning. I'm Betty Wisicki, working for Juarez and Associates, implementing the project known as Reading for Malawi Reform. And I'll be presenting on the title, Ensuring Disability Inclusion under Malawi's National Reading Program. Presentation overview. The general overview of our presentation, like Reform, will focus on the efforts that Reform has been doing so far in ensuring that learners with disabilities are able to read, and also trying to strengthen the capacity of Ministry of Education, Science and Technology to assure that inclusive education in Malawi is being implemented and no child is left behind. So some of the key issues that I will capture in the presentation are as follows. Number one, overview of education for children with disabilities in Malawi, inclusive education in Malawi, about reading for Malawi, Reform's role with the National Reading Program, accomplishments and lessons learned. In 2017, the Education Management Information System, EMIS, data indicated that 146,048 out of 5,073,729 learners were identified with special needs in all primary schools in Malawi. This represents a 2.8% of the total primary enrollment. But in actual sense, we have more learners with disabilities in our country, only that the challenge is that most of the disabilities are not detected and diagnosed early. So some of the learners who are having disabilities in our primary schools were not counted to be part and parcel of the number presented in here. the challenge that we have in Malawi in terms of ensuring that special needs education is being effectively implemented. In Malawi, children with disabilities are one of the most socially marginalized groups. They are less likely to start school and less likely to stay in school. And those in school experience a lot of challenges. Some of the main contributing factors to this are that the environment is not structured to meet the needs of all learners. As you all understand, that we have different categories of learners with disabilities. We have learners who are deaf or hard of hearing. We have learners who are blind or low vision. We have learners with learning disabilities. We have learners with physical disabilities, and many more. So for a school to be able to make sure that it's able to provide the necessary support to all these learners, they're supposed to tackle each and every disability separately and ensure that the needs of those particular learners are met according to the type of disability that the children are having. But currently in Malawi, we don't have enough resources as well as enough personnel to support learners in school to achieve their goals. So most of the learners, they unlikely go to school, or for those who stay in school, they face enormous challenges. Inclusive education in Malawi. The government of Malawi launched a national strategy on inclusive education in 2016. The goal of the strategy is to ensure that learners with diverse needs in Malawi have equitable access to quality education. And according to the strategy, special needs education resource centers are used to deliver inclusive education in 146 public primary schools across Malawi. You might be interested to know that in Malawi, we have special schools or special resource centers that cater for learners with the visual impairment or learners who are blind, and learners with hearing impairment or learners who are deaf. But the majority of the learners go to mainstream resource centers. So in total, we have, of late, I think the statistics that we have 146 resource centers countrywide that's covering both special and mainstream resource centers in Malawi. But we're still doing some sort of research, because we know that each and every day or each and every term or year, there are a lot of resource centers that are born in our communities. So we're trying to populate that and see how much do we have now. But this is the statistics that we collected in the past year. Learners who are deaf or hard of hearing. Maybe I should pose a question to the audience. How many of us are in the field of special and inclusive education here? Maybe you can type in your box. And how much of us, or how many of us here can be able to communicate in sign language or are familiar with sign language? How many of us can be able to read and write Braille? Obviously, the answer is just a few of us can be able to do that. So similarly in Malawi, we have a category of learners who are deaf or hard of hearing. And mostly these learners are supported in special schools. And the special schools ensures that the exposure sign language and appropriate bilingualism instruction to these particular learners for them to be able to follow instruction and do better in school. However, we have a large number of learners who are deaf, who are not in these special schools, but they get instructional support from the mainstream resource centers, where they learn together with learners who are not disabled and learners with other categories of disability. So it's like a mixture of learners with disabilities, learners without disabilities, and amongst the learners who have disabilities, there are also different categories learning together at a common resource center. REFAM's main objectives. REFAM focuses on these three main objectives. The first one is that Ministry of Education, Science and Technology's capacity to deliver reading instruction to children with disabilities strengthened. In order to achieve this objective, REFAM ensures that policy framework is updated, early detection protocols are implemented, resource networks are activated, evaluation and reporting is improved. So after achieving this, we are able to say that we have managed to achieve the first objective, whereby the capacity of MOIS to deliver reading instruction to learners with disabilities is strengthened. The second objective is that reading instruction and learning assessment for children with disabilities improved. Under this objective, reform ensures that disability-specific reading materials are developed, teacher utilization of disability-specific materials and practices are improved, classroom coaching is improved, and the utilization of resource centers, resource networks are also improved. And the last objective is that family and community support to learning for children with disabilities improved. Under this one, the reform will ensure that awareness about the learning potential of people with disabilities is raised, community support to schooling children with disabilities is increased, family engagement and reading practice for students is also increased. What is reform's role within the NRP? As we all know that NRP has been doing a lot in terms of improving the reading skills of learners in Malawi, reform is also there to support a specific component whereby it ensures that all learners, despite of their disabilities, despite of their diversity, they're able also to access education and be able to improve in their reading skills. So in order to achieve this, reform provides an intervention model that improves identification and assessment of learners with disabilities. Malawi being one of the countries that are in the third world or less developed countries, we have a serious challenge in terms of identification and assessment of disabilities. In most cases, other learners who have these disabilities are left aside without being given the appropriate support because they're not identified early and provided the adequate support. This mostly could be because of lack of expertise amongst maybe the officials, say the teachers that we have, they don't have enough training on how to do assessment and identification, or maybe also on the part of the health personnel and other stakeholders that they should intervene and support so that whenever they detect that a child has a disability, they should report and make sure that the child is identified early and adequate support or enough support appropriate to that particular need is provided to that particular child. The second one is to provide technical assistance to MOIS on approaches to teaching literacy for learners with disabilities. As I've already said, we have different categories of learners with disabilities, and their needs are also different. So in terms of disability, there's nothing like one size fits all. You need to assess the type of disability that the child has, what's his or her needs, and how best can those needs be met. For instance, if I have a classroom and I have a child who is deaf, my teaching approach could not be general. I have to make sure that this child who is deaf is also be able to get what I'm saying, whether I might use sign language, pictures, writing mostly on the board, or any other approach that can make sure that this child is able to follow whatever I'm doing. Or I can hire the service as a government, maybe we can lobby the government to hire the service of professional sign language interpreters to be deployed in the schools so that as a teacher, when I'm busy teaching, this interpreter could be able to interpret the message that I'm giving to the classroom to this individual or individuals who are deaf so that they're able to follow the proceedings of the instruction, and at the end of the day, they can benefit like any other child. So reform is providing this technical support to MOIS to ensure that teaching literacy for learners with disabilities is improved and approaches that are appropriate should be followed. The third one is work with the disabled persons organizations to raise awareness about the learning potential for learners with disabilities. In Malawi, we have a team or a group of disabled persons organizations, DPOs. and they operate under the umbrella of the Federation of Disability Organizations in Malawi. So we understand that for us to be able to be successful in whatever we're doing, we're supposed to work hand in hand with these organizations, because they're the people who are on the ground. They have the disability, they have the experience of what it means to be disabled, and they have proper ways that they could devise or suggest to us on how best we can support them effectively to achieve our objectives. So RIFAM works hand in hand with these organizations, like organizations for people who are deaf, organization for people who are blind, organization for people with learning disabilities, the Federation of Disabled Organizations in Malawi, and many more, to ensure that the potential of learners with disabilities is raised. And if they have people like in the communities who are members of these organizations, that they were able to go to school and have some sort of education, we use them as role models to motivate our learners in the schools, that when they work hard, one day they could also be like them. So these organizations are playing a very critical role in promoting awareness about learning potential and reading for our children. Achievements to date. Ever since RIFAM started implementing its activities over the past months, we have realized a number of achievements. The first one is increased dialogue on the needs of learners with disabilities and created positive relationship with the MOIST. In this aspect, RIFAM is working hand in hand with all the departments under MOIST, like special needs education, DIAS, planning, basic, detailed, and the like, to ensure that issues of disabilities are implemented in these departments, because disability issues are cross-cutting. So whenever they're devising the activities, programming, and anything else that they're doing, they should also have a thought of disability issues that at the end of the day, it should not be like an afterthought, but they should be part and parcel of the planning. And at the end of the day, the initiative or the effort should benefit each and every child on the ground. And this dialogue has really increased of late, and there is a very good collaboration between RIFAM and the MOIST departments. The second one is strengthen disability inclusive education elements in NRP. RIFAM is trying its best to ensure that in all activities related to NRP, issues of disabilities are not left out, and proper approaches, methodologies, and mechanisms on how to ensure that learners with disabilities are also benefiting from NRP are incorporated in whatever is being done and shared under the banner of NRP in Malawi. The third one is conducted national reading assessments for learners who are blind or have low vision, those who are deaf or have hard of hearing or have learning disabilities. So these are the main categories of disability that the RIFAM is working on: the deaf, the blind, and the learners with learning disabilities. So for the first time in Malawi, an EGRA assessment was conducted targeting these three categories. And the assessment was a very big success, because there was a lot of work that was done in order to ensure that the instruments, the EGRA instruments, were adapted to suit the individual needs of these categories of learners with disabilities. Like for instance, when we are conducting the EGRA for learners who are deaf, we made sure that the assessment has to be adapted into Malawian Sign Language. And there was we also had to develop the sign language video in order to make sure that there is no biasness in terms of assessing. So each and every learner was exposed to the same sort of assessment. And when we are doing the collection of the data, we are able to capture the responses of the learners through the videos, so that when we come back for analysis, we could review what the learner was saying and cross-check if that was in line with what was captured. And we also engaged assessors who are deaf themselves to be part and parcel of the work done, because this really improved the communication mode between the learners and the assessors, because they had a common language, and they also acted as role models. When they go out there, people were like, oh, we also have people who are educated and could be working as assessors. So it was like a motivation to the public. Similarly, when we are doing the assessment for learners with visual impairment and learning disabilities, we involved people who are blind and experts who are working within the area of learning disabilities. So that at the end of the day, the materials that we produce, whether they're in Braille or large print or in sign language, are accepted and endorsed by the disability community. At the same time, they are also like in line with the standards of NRP and the Ministry of Education. So the national reading assessments were done effectively, and the results were so amazing to see that mostly our learners are really like lagging behind, and there is a lot that is supposed to be done. And I hope the report will be shared soon once everything has been done and finalized. Lessons learned. We've learned a lot of lessons. And the first one, that ensuring that special needs education teachers participate in reforms organized training workshops has created a space for peer learning. In this aspect, we mean that SNE teachers provide guidance to their mainstream peers on how to identify learners with special needs and share creative ways to modify the lesson plans and better serve the learners. Here, what I'm trying to say is that we have a lot of teachers in Malawi, but most of them, they don't have skills and expertise on how to support learners with disabilities. For instance, in Malawi, we only have one college, Montfort College of Special Needs Education, which trains specialist teachers. And the intake is so low. They only take like 150 teachers plus within a space of 3 years. And you could see that the demand that we have out there is just too much. And this number cannot go out there and support each and every learner in all the resource centers that these learners are getting their education. So in order to ensure that we are not just sitting back, we are working hand in hand with the government to ensure that regular teachers that we have in our primary schools, teachers who do not have skills on how to handle and support learners with disabilities, are given the skills on how to identify and support this particular learner from the specialist teachers available within those particular localities. So through our trainings, we are empowering the specialist teachers to have time to reach out to their peers who have no skills on how to support learners with disabilities, on how best to identify and provide support to learners with disabilities. I can give an example. YESA is doing continuous assessment and remediation. But then you could see that despite the effort that the teacher is taking to make sure that this learner is able to read, the child is still failing to do anything. No matter how many sessions the child might have, the child is still on the same level. And that will tell a teacher that something's not on with the child, something might be wrong. And this now takes us to the issue of identification. The teacher now should have should take an extra gear to assess the child to see if the child has special needs. You could see that at the end that maybe the child is not just failing because it's dull or something else, but maybe has a specific disability. And it is this time when the teacher should modify the lesson plan and ensure that appropriate mechanisms are applied for this child to be able to understand the instruction and be able to perform like any other child. Opportunity to train more staff, disabled persons organizations and partners has a force multiplier effect. On this one, we mean that it extends the reach of disability programming deeper into institutions, communities, and schools. It increases awareness and understanding of issues for learners with disabilities and creates opportunity for better planning and support. So working hand in hand with the disabled persons organizations and other partners has really helped RIFAM to reach out to the grassroots where most of the learners who have disabilities are learning. And the ultra-poor households are mostly in the villages. So through the use of these channels and cadres, we're able to reach out to all the learners that we are targeting. Thank you so much for your listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Betty. And thank you to all of our presenters. We have now come to the end of the presentation section of this panel. And I would now like to call on our discussant, Dr. Alyssa Morley, who is with Michigan State University, will be our discussant for this panel. Alyssa is an education policy specialist, has worked in Malawi on Malawian issues for over a decade, initially as a secondary school teacher when she was part of the Peace Corps. So I want to now welcome her to give her statement. Alyssa, if you're here, please turn on your mic and your video. Over to you.
Hello. Are you able to hear me? Yeah? Okay, great. Thank you all. Good morning to some of you, good afternoon to others. I want to thank the panelists for sharing these very informative presentations, and also thank the chair of this panel, Badimi Carroll, for your role in organizing this panel. It's really a privilege to hear these presentations and to serve as a discussant for this panel about the National Reading Program. The presentations have covered a lot of ground, and in my comments, I'll offer some synthesizing remarks and also pose some questions for the panelists and audience members to consider in our discussion, which will follow. These presentations have helpfully oriented us to opportunities, achievements, and challenges of NRP. We learned that NRP is animated by the goal of improving the reading skills of all students in Malawi in Chichewa and English in the first 4 years of primary school. The achievements of NRP to date are truly extensive. These achievements include face-to-face training activities conducted across the country, school-based coaching and teacher learning circles, measures for evaluating and grouping students, targeted support for children with disabilities, increased dialogue on needs of learners with disabilities, and really massive outputs in teaching and learning materials. We learned that the results from national reading assessments suggest that reading performance among learners is improving. NRP is an ambitious national initiative, and its success in benefiting all learners involves many people, not only every primary teacher in Malawi, but also public servants at national, district, zonal, and school levels. It further involves families and communities, bilateral development organizations, implementing partners, and millions of young learners. NRP is a complex undertaking that has brought together many stakeholders. Another layer of the complexity is that NRP has been carried out through several separate but interrelated activities: Merit, REFAM, YESA, SIGRAM. I imagine that experiences from NRP can teach all of us about implementing large-scale development projects in education. And I invite panelists to reflect on the challenges and achievements in their efforts to coordinate and harmonize NRP. Given the number of activities and individuals involved, how has a shared mission been established and maintained? Establishing collective commitment for NRP has likely been crucial, particularly if NRP presents new ways of teaching, learning, and evaluating. Along these lines, it may be interesting to hear more about where NRP builds upon frameworks of instruction and teacher development that were previously operating in Malawi, and where it introduces new models. In doing so, how has NRP drawn from existing strengths in curriculum, teacher practice, and teacher education in Malawi? In cases where NRP has sought to change practice, how have tensions between new and previous modes been navigated? We might also think about the teaching and learning models promoted through NRP that we heard about and learned about from all of the panelists: peer coaching, teacher learning circles, grouping of learners, inclusion practices. How can these models be incorporated into other areas of educational practice beyond early grade reading instruction? Drawing lessons from NRP is particularly important for Malawi, but there are likely valuable lessons for other contexts as well. This panel comes at a moment when reading and literacy are at the forefront of many global and national education agendas. In global dialogues about reading reform, we hear common questions. These include: how can we prioritize reading while also honoring the multiple goals of education. We saw a picture of a school timetable with the many subjects that teachers tackle. This timetable reminds us that schools are sites for not only learning to read, but also learning about history, math, what it means to be a citizen, for example. How can we balance these broader goals with a focus on reading? Additionally, how can we accurately and efficiently measure reading skills in a way that appreciates the complexity of reading, particularly for multilingual children? The architects and implementers of NRP have navigated considerations such as these, and I suspect that their experiences can provide valuable lessons for others engaged in reading-related programs and policy around the world. I'd like to close by asking what is next for NRP. We heard about the program expanding to upper primary grades and that there are plans to consolidate and accelerate gains in early grade reading. What is on the horizon, and how will NRP leaders incorporate the knowledge gained from past challenges and achievements as the program grows and evolves? Thank you again for these informative, enriching presentations and for the opportunity to engage with you through this panel.
Thank you very much, Alyssa. I think you've given us all food for thought, and thanks for pulling together all the threads from the different presentations. So hopefully the panelists can address some of the points that you've raised. I've also asked Lauren Edwards, my co-host, to just select some questions from the chats. We've had a lot of questions come in already, which is really great, shows that everybody is engaged. So Lauren will pick some questions from the chat and ask those to the panelists as well, and then we'll have a round of answers from the panelists. If you can all mute your phone. Okay, good. So Lauren.
Sure, thanks, Benami, and thanks to all of our presenters for sharing the really insightful and informative presentations. From the chat that's been coming through, I've selected, I guess, one question for each of our presenters. So I'll flag all three questions, and then perhaps we can go around and have everyone answer if that sounds like a good order. Let's see, first for Grace, one of the questions that came through was how the ministry and Merit and NRP ensure that teacher learning circles meet at least once a month for 90 minutes, and if this is embedded in official policy and expectations and how it's monitored. And we did have some insight from Jeremy that there was a circular that was issued, but I thought that could be another interesting point of discussion to share some of the monitoring practices and how we're able to encourage teacher learning circles to meet once a month.
Should I answer now? Thank you.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Sure, go ahead, Grace.
Okay, thank you. The primary education advisor, they work with our district coordinators to go out and support the section heads conduct their teacher learning circles. Also, aside from the circular that was sent out from the ministry itself has developed a framework for teacher professional development, and it has incorporated the teacher learning circle. So it is receiving support from Save the Children and I think other partners. So it is already part of the larger teacher professional development framework. So we are hoping that's already taken on board by the ministry. And also during their district review meetings, the primary education advisor is supposed to report on the teacher learning circles when they happened, how many teachers attended, and issues that were discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. All right, and then I'll ask a couple other questions for our presenters, and then we'll go through the answers. Let's see. So one of the questions for Mavuto and Yasa was that the presentation focused on the reading remediation, and one of our participants was curious to know more about any work on writing and other language skills. And then one question for Betty and Rifam to perhaps share a little bit more about, at the teacher training level, how many special education courses do general education teachers take, or what is their exposure to some of the special education courses that are there? And then one, I think, a question that could go to all of the presenters that was brought up was a question around how the NRP is working and handling the large classroom size versus one teacher in those classrooms. So I think maybe if we could start with the two questions to the individual presenters, and then if anyone has any thoughts about the large classroom size, we could move to there. So maybe Mavutu, if you want to go ahead.
Okay, the question on why we are only focusing on reading, if you look at the objective of ESA and remediation is to help develop reading skills in our learners. That's why as of now we are dealing with the skill of reading, not writing and the other skills. So yes, we are only dealing with the reading based on the objective that we have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Betty, if you wanted to talk about the special education courses that general education teachers.
On the part of teacher training in Malawi, we have the director that is responsible for that, the director of teacher education. But amongst the teacher training colleges, it is only currently Montfort College of Special Needs Education that is training specialist teachers for all categories of disabilities. So mostly, or I can say basically what is on the ground is that Montfort is training teachers who have different specializations. For instance, they are teachers who specialize in deaf issues, that's hearing impairment. There are teachers who specialize in visual impairment, that's blind. And there are teachers who specialize in learning difficulties. There are teachers who specialize in deaf-blind education. And there are also, I think currently there are those four main categories that are being trained and deployed on the ground. I hope I've answered the question.
Betty, I think they were also curious about what training is given to mainstream teachers, seeing that there are not enough special ed teachers to go around. Are there any trainings that are given to mainstream teachers to support?
Yeah, I think of late, the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology introduced an inclusive education package to be part and parcel of the mainstream teacher education courses. So each and every teacher that is currently graduating from a teacher training college has skills on on inclusive education to say. But the only challenge is that these teachers, they only have like an understanding or a thorough knowledge of what is inclusive education, but they don't specialize in specific disabilities. And when they get to the ground, they cannot handle specific cases of learners with disabilities. For instance, if they have a child who is blind in their class, they can't read and write in Braille. So obviously the child cannot be effectively supported. Unlike if they have a specialist teacher in that particular environment who can transcribe the print into Braille, and when the child writes back into Braille, they can be transcribed into print. So the course that is offered now in mainstream or regular TTCs is a basic understanding of what is inclusive education.
Great, thank you. I want to remind, so I think Alyssa in her discussion brought up a few points that I think it would be good for panelists to try to address. Anyone can address them. There was one about coordination and what we can learn from NRP about coordinating a number of different activities and partners towards a specific goal. I think there was also a question about, what is new about the NRP and what are some of the things that we've built on from what was there before, and whether there were any conflicts in trying to get behavior change in teachers, for example. Is there tension between what was there before and what we're trying to do now? And I also want to open it up, so if there's anyone who actually wants, so we can hear some more voices, if there's anyone who wants to actually ask a question, feel free to raise your hand, turn your video on, raise your hand, so we can get some more voices in the conversation.
Hi, this
Let me
is...
start.
Yes, Doreen, go ahead.
Hi. Good afternoon, this is Doreen Myrie. I'm also from Malawi. What I was wondering, is it possible to get access to the PowerPoints that were shared earlier in the presentation?
Yes, so just to answer that one, we are recording this and this will be up in the CIES website. So you should be able to get access to the recording.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Nguya, if you can unmute yourself. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Nguya Henderson.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you talked about what was there before in the way teachers in primary schools have been teaching, or they have been doing in terms of teaching learners how to read. What I should say is that previously there were a number of techniques which the teachers were using, but reading itself was not specialized as it has happened with the National Reading Program. So previously, reading was taken as something which is just one entity, I should say, because everything was crammed, was put together. But with the coming of National Reading Program, it is like now teachers know how they can go about the teaching of reading itself, because NRP introduced the components of reading, which previously teachers in teacher training colleges were not training on. So it's like now teachers know how to go about introducing the reading instruction itself, like you talk of starting with phonological awareness, then going to alphabetic principle, then moving on to all those other components of reading. That has helped the teachers now to handle the teaching of reading as simple as it, compared to what was happening in the previous years.
Thanks, Nguya. Patrick Capito, I see a hand raised.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. Two things that I want the panel to respond to. The first one is on the use of local language in the teaching of English. Standard 4, for example. What is it that is being done? Are they allowed to do that, considering that most of the learners cannot even understand what is being said? Are they allowed to use the local language in the actual teaching, not just in the procedural elements, or maybe explaining how to do, I do, we do, you do, and the like, but the actual teaching? And the second one is when it was responded to again that the NRP is focusing on reading and did not less on the others. But I feel that that could be, don't you think that that could be the main problem? That we are like isolating a skill from a whole language, instead of focusing on also writing, that the more they read and write, and also speaking and listening in a language will help them to improve and not just focusing on improving reading as if it's an independent skill of the others. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Is there one more person before I turn it over to the panelists? Yes, Mickey Kumwamba.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think the presenter who was presenting on special ed has cited some of the gaps that are existing in our teacher training. For example, that the curriculum only trains teachers on theoretical skills, but not actually practical skills. Now, is there anything in the pipeline that we are working on, or what that the ministry is working on, or the stakeholders are working on to improve or try to address that existing gap in our teacher education system?
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna hand it over to the panelists. Maybe starting with Jeremiah from the ministry, if Jeremiah is still there.
Yes, Carol, I'm there.
Okay, yes, I can hear you. Thank you. Do you want to address any of the questions that were posed?
Yes. Let me start by what Patrick has actually asked on the use of local languages. Let me say that we have allowed, that teachers can actually use local language to explain some of the concepts that are deemed difficult for learners to understand in English. Not only the instruction, say, for example, I do, you do, no, but even in the actual teaching, where the teacher sees that the learners are not getting the concept. So we have actually made provision to allow that they can use the local language. Secondly, on the NRP focusing on reading only, that's not very true. What I got from Kiware Mavuto is that assessment, the continuous assessment and remediation is focusing on reading, but NRP focuses on complete, language that we are looking at in reading. We are also looking at writing. We are training the learners, say how to read and how to actually write. So both reading and writing skills are included in the NRP package. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Grace, do you want to come in?
Sure, thank you. I'll start with the local language one. Yes, because we are aware that our children are not ready to read. So in our instructions, we do say, they say it in English, that they are having. For example, I watched a read aloud lesson in English in Standard 2. So what the teacher did was reading the story, an interactive story with the learners, and then come back and say that in Chichewa, come back to English. So the instruction is, you say it in Chichewa, support the learners when they don't understand, but come back to English. So she would engage them in questions about maybe when they were making predictions about the story during reading, but always coming back to English. The second one on focusing on reading, yeah, they do write in Standard 1, letters, syllables, simple words, but by Standard 3 and 4, we actually have units on writing. How do you write using a graphic organizer, and then develop your writing skill. So we are doing that in the National Reading Program. When they are doing the dialogues, they're doing read aloud, they are questions that they have to respond through writing. So writing is still there. They are poems, they are dramatizing, so we are taking care of all the language skills in the National Reading Program. There was also a question on what was there that we're building on. I think in Jeremiah's presentation, and when we're looking at Malawi's context, in terms of looking at teacher professional support, we're building on the previous pilot literacy interventions that were there. We had, for example, the EGRA that was there before. We had the PSSP, Malawi Teacher Professional Development Support, a lot of them. So what the National Reading Program is doing is continuing the practices that were there. For example, the EGRA had a coaching aspect that was very heavy in some of the schools, but not all schools. So the National Reading Program has expanded that to all of the schools. Maybe the new thing for us is the teacher learning circle. That wasn't there before, getting teachers at the same school and then have them work together. The teaching of the 5 components of reading, that has been very explicit, drilling teachers on that and having the practicum. So yes, on one side, we are building on what was there, but also introducing new aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Mavuto, do you want to come in?
No, that's fine. I'm fine.
Okay. Betsy?
Yeah, sure. Just to respond on the question, on how we want to improve the gap on the ground is that we're working like tirelessly hand in hand with MOEST to ensure that we introduce practical courses in all the TTCs. For example, I can give a reference of the Department of Teacher Education. We are working with them to develop a concept where we hope at the end of the day, we could introduce courses like sign language, braille reading and writing in all the colleges. So be sure that when a teacher is graduating from a TTC, he will have these practical skills. And when they go out there, they'll be able to interface and support the learners they will find in the resource centers. So discussions and the plannings are underway, but once these things gets out of our hands, I think it will be made known to the public on what steps are we taking and how best we can implement that. Thank you.
Thanks, Betsy. Sophia, I see you have your hand raised.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yes.
Oh, mine was just a comment that we have 4 areas of literacy. That's listening, speaking, reading and writing, and they all need to come together, not focus on just reading. That was all.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have anyone else? Ingria, you want to come in again? You're on mute. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
And can you introduce yourself and say who you're from, where you're from?
I'm a teacher educator.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, so you're a teacher educator in Malawi.
I am a teacher trainer at the Karonga Teachers Training College.
Excellent, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to comment on the use of local language. Okay?
Yes, go ahead.
What has been said is true that some teachers, sometimes they will tend to switch to teach English in local language. But the initiative that the NRP took was a good one. But I have an observation. This observation is coming in when the teachers were trained on how they can use local language when they are teaching. It so happened that the NRP revised the Standard 1 Teacher's Guide for English. They included the icons which are indicating something like home, which meant that they have to go to local language. Now, if you go through the teacher's guide itself, you will find that there are so many icons about home, which has led to the teachers interpret that to say, wherever there is an icon of home, they have to use the local language. Most of the teachers are doing that. I don't know how we can help them to solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to come in?
Yes, I can.
Yes, Grace.
Yes, the standard one English, after a year of implementation, we did a survey, anecdotal reports, teachers were having trouble, teaching in the classroom. So because of the same question, do I use local language? The children can't understand me. So we came back to the drawing table and decided that, okay, let's guide them. Let's give them some leeway of using the local language. So the icon of a traditional hat was representing the use of local language. And the guiding sentence is, if this is necessary. So the teacher judges that, oh, well, my students can't even understand this. Can I go back to the local language? So the idea is that they use the English, then they have the little hat, they use, whether it's Chichewa or Tumbuka, whatever local language in the area is used, then they go back to English. So they don't end at the local language. The guidance is English, local language, and switch back to English. So that's how the training was done, and even in the TG, that's the that is in the teacher guide. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. I saw Mickey, you had your hand up again.
Yes, thank you so much. I am Mike Mwamba. I'm currently at the Oregon State University. I'm doing my PhD. I just want to come back to the question that Ms. Wisike responded to about special education. I think she only responded on pre-service teachers, but we understand that sometimes it takes long for teachers to be deployed once they graduate from teacher training college. So is there any immediate redress to that gap based on the field-based teachers? Are there any plans to train field-based teachers on how to address the existing gap that is there? Because we understand even those, most of field-based teachers are not very conversant with the special ed and how to assist learners in their own classrooms. So is there anything, the immediate redress to that gap?
Thank you. Betsy, do you want to respond?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for the question. In response to that, I should say that reform is working hand in hand with the government to ensure that teachers who are already deployed in the schools are having the skills that are supposed to have in order to support the learners. In this case, during my presentation, I said that we have 146 resource centers. So according to our project, we are hoping that these 146 resource centers will reach out to 500 schools, and each and every resource center will have like I should say like a catchment or a number of schools that are surrounding that particular resource center that will get support from this resource center, which will act as a hub. So if you have like say one resource center, it will reach say to 3 or 5 schools. Another one, 5 or so schools. In the end, we could see that a lot of schools will be reached out, and these teachers who are specialized in working in these specific resource centers will be giving out the skills to teachers who are regular and supporting children with disabilities in other centers or other primary schools that do not have resource centers. So we will have like a multiplier effect, and at the end of the project, we ensure that at least not less than 500 schools have benefited from this initiative. On top of that, as I said also, that we're working hand in hand with the disabled persons organizations. So in this case, in terms of like issues of sign language, we are working with the Malawi National Association of the Deaf. They have branches nationwide, and we'll have trainings, only that maybe the COVID pandemic has disturbed us a bit, but we had plans that we'll have trainings in all the regions of Malawi, orienting teachers who specialized in hearing, who are handling learners who are deaf to have sign language skills. So we use Manad like the deaf association members, plus the reform team and the MOIST officials to go out and do these particular trainings. Similarly, with issues of braille reading and writing, teachers who are supporting learners who are blind in those particular schools, but they don't have the skills, they'll be reached out with a specific training on ground, right there in their schools, on how they could master the skill and be able to support the child. So it will be like a two-way sort of thing, targeting pre-service and those who are already serving on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Becky. And I think with that, yes, Grace, briefly, yes.
The National Reading Program also includes the one of the topics in this training is special needs, and as well as gender and safe learning spaces. So all the teachers, the regular classroom teachers, is receiving this kind of training during the NRP training. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. So we're 1 minute to 10, and I just want to use the last minute to thank everyone so much for your participation. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to all of you who attended. I think at some point we had up to 60 people in attendance, and you have engaged with us through your chat questions and also through the questions you have posed via Zoom. As I mentioned, we are recording this session, and we hope to have a link to the video on the CIES conference website. We will also send it around by email, and hopefully all of you will be able to get that and the presentations. Thanks so much, everyone.